So 1930s Chicago Herald-Examiner newspaper. Okay, long time ago, right? But there's a story in that newspaper about a guy named Harry Havens. Harry was just an average guy. His story was not crazy by any means. He never done anything real famous or noteworthy. But Harry was a regular guy who, in his home, like with his wife, he loved to help out around the house. He'd hang pictures, wash dishes, did a lot of the chores, but he felt a little bit unappreciated through that process. And one day, just out of the blue, he's doing some chores, and his wife scolds him on the way that he was doing one of his chores. And when she did, he snapped, like done. Like, I'm done. Not like divorce done, but this is what he told her. He said, I'm out. He said, I'm going to the room. I'm getting into bed. I don't want to see you or anyone else ever again. A little temper tantrum. Goes into his room, according to the newspaper article, puts a blindfold over his eyes because he doesn't want to see her or anyone else ever again. And he laid in bed for 7 years. I don't even know if that story's true. Like, I'm like, there's no way. I don't know, but I've heard some crazy things before. But that's the story that the newspaper printed. The guy laid in bed for 7 years. True or not, here's what I do know. There are better ways to handle conflict. A lot better ways, right? Like, conflict is universal. Like every person around this planet, in every country, in every era of time, has had conflict. If you read the Bible and you open up to Genesis and you start reading through, it takes you a couple chapters, and all of a sudden, conflict enters. I mean, conflict is universal. Here's what else we know, though. Jesus said to believers, so if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, this isn't directed to you. Jesus said to followers of Jesus, he said, this is how people will know that you follow me, that you love one another. Like how you love each other. That's how people, it's not a bumper sticker, it's not a cool Christian t-shirt. How you love people is what will make other people go, oh, that must be a follower of Jesus. So if conflict is universal, we're all gonna face fights. But yet we are known by our love for people. We've got to figure out how to do conflict right? We've got to figure out how to love people when we have problems, when we have issues. That's why we started this series Verses a couple weeks ago. And week 1, we spent some time talking about wisdom. We looked at what the Proverbs says, that a wise person is slow to anger. And we realized that when we're slow to anger, we are able to overlook a lot of conflict, right? Most of the conflict we have, the small things, it's because someone did something and we responded immediately out of anger, short fuse, and all of a sudden the conflict started. Had we just taken a deep breath and went, okay, that was dumb, and moved on, no conflict. Then last week, we said, hey, if we've got to engage in conflict, we've got to start with me. I've got to get the log out of my eye, Jesus said, before I address the speck in someone else's. If there's a problem, almost always, not always, but almost always, I have a piece of it too, right? And so I've got to handle my part of the conflict. I've got to apologize. I've got to take care of my business. I've got to take care of my amends before I engage with someone else. And then we come to week 3. The final week, we're going to look at a process that Jesus gives us to walk through conflict. But what I want you to take away, I hope you'll take away the process, but what I want you to take away is an overarching principle that was found in all 3 weeks. And that overarching principle is going to come, it's going to be determined by the path we choose to walk down towards conflict. Like all of us want to resolve conflict. Everyone does. No one wants to live in conflict forever. But how we choose to resolve it, the path we walk down makes all the difference in the world. Let me just give you an example like out of the business world about paths. Air Canada, that is their American Airlines, one of the major transportation companies in Canada. They as a company want to make money. They want to make profits. Just like us, we want to resolve conflict, right? They want to make money, but how they make money, the path they choose to get there makes all the difference in the world. Air Canada made the decision to reduce costs. And one of the ways they went to reduce costs was they said, hey, we're going to get rid of the vast majority of our customer service department. We don't need customer service if we have AI chatbots. And so we're not going to have real people, we're going to have chatbots. Y'all love chatbots, right? They're so helpful. That's what Air Canada found out. They had a guy, Jake Moffitt. Jake's family had a loss. And he knew that there were bereavement fares that you could fly with some Canada Airlines if somebody died in your family to go see them, and they would give you a reduced cost. But just like most people who are dealing with a moment like that, like he's got a short window. Family member passes, he's got to get there, and so he gets on the website, he interacts with the chatbot, asking about bereavement fares, and the chatbot tells him, just get the regular ticket, and then submit later, and you'll be reimbursed for the difference between what you paid full price and the bereavement. So he bought a $1,600 worth of airfare to go see his family. Bereavement airfare would have been about $800, about half. And when he submitted to Air Canada said, well, that's not what we do. That's not our process. So sorry. That wasn't good enough for Jake Moffitt. So he took Air Canada to court for his $800. Air Canada made the argument that the chatbot was a legal entity all of its own. The judge said, no, don't think so. And they ended up losing that, had to pay the $800 plus court costs. That's not that big of a deal if you're Air Canada. But here's what else they discovered through the change from customer service to chatbot. It actually, in reducing costs and trying to save money, it did reduce cost, but it also cost them an additional $15 million of customers. Of people like Jake Moffitt who said, I'm never flying that airline again. Hey, I'm not doing this. I'm going to go with their airline because I can talk to a person. The goal is to make money. The goal is to resolve conflict. But you have two paths. You can reduce costs and save money, or you can have great customer service and make money. Well, if we're going to resolve conflict, we have two paths, and here's what you have to decide. And they go through the last 2 weeks, plus you'll see it in the passage we look at today. You have to choose, and I have to choose. Do you want to win fights, or do you want to win people? Because to resolve conflict, you're going to go one way or the other. You're either going to win the fight and win the argument, win the conflict, or you're going to win people. And you make the decision, as well as I do, which path we're going to walk down. Now, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 18 this morning. We're going to look at a couple of verses. If you don't have a Bible, don't panic. They're going to put the verses up on the screen for you so you can see them. If you don't have a Bible and would love some help getting one, man, find me afterwards. I'd love to help you find a Bible so you could have one. Matthew chapter 18 is an eyewitness account of Jesus' life, written by a guy named Matthew. He was a tax collector. He was one of Jesus' disciples that followed him. And so it is a part of the New Testament. It's the second, kind of the back third of the Bible. The first part of the Bible is the Old Testament, if you're a Bible reader, and it is the story of God's relationship with his people, with the nation of Israel, with the Jewish people. And Genesis to Malachi, all the way through that Old Testament, there's prophecy, there's law, there's narrative stories, there's poetry. We looked at some wisdom literature in week 1 out of the Old Testament. But all of those stories and all of that wisdom literature talks about how God has a relationship with his people so that everyone else, all the other nations around Israel could look and go, that's how we do life with God. All through that Old Testament, though, there's this thread. There's this picture of a coming Savior. The Jews called him a Messiah. His name is Jesus. And when Jesus shows up, the New Testament opens, and it opens with 4 eyewitness accounts. I mentioned one of them, Matthew, will be in today. The others are Mark, Luke, and John. And then the rest of the New Testament primarily are letters written to churches that have been planted. How do you live out the teachings of Jesus? And so we like to look at all portions of Scripture, how to walk with God, how the church should function, and what Jesus says. Today, we're in Matthew chapter 18, where one of his disciples, Matthew, recorded Jesus saying this, verse 15. Jesus said, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you've won that person back. But if you're unsuccessful, take 1 or 2 others with you and go back again so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat the person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. Now, let me just kind of set the stage here, because this is a passage of Scripture that when it gets a little uncomfortable for some people, right? This passage is written for believer to believer, follower of Jesus to follower of Jesus. That's who Jesus is talking to. Now, what I would suggest to you, if we're to love people, that's what Jesus called us to do. If I have a conflict with you, this is the path I need to walk down. First, I'm going to look, can I overlook it? Is it just wise to overlook? It's a big deal. Second thing I'm going to do, what we talked about last week, hey, what do I need to fix in me? Then I'm going to walk through this process, believer to believer. But here's what I want to suggest to you. If you're in conflict with somebody who isn't a follower of Jesus, maybe it's wise to handle them as closely as we can to the way we would handle with each other. Like if I love you and you're a brother, and I love this person, if this is how believers should interact, because it's how people see us, how we love, I want to love the person over here who may not be following Jesus the same way. And so I'm going to walk through this as best I can with them too. We're held accountable, though, by Jesus for each other. Now, here's the other thing. This brings up a topic of church discipline. And when you're preaching on a stage at a church whose slogan is a messy church for messy people, church discipline sure seems a little bit odd, right? Like, okay, if we're all a mess and you're a mess and I'm a mess, how do I get kicked out, right? Like that's kind of the wrestling here. What I want you to see through this is what you'll see all the way through this passage. Once we dig into it, it is not about a policeman coming to look for someone who's done something wrong that we can throw in jail. The heart is not that I'm coming to find you and somebody did something wrong and we got to get all the messy people out of here. It's the heart of a physician who says, hey, I see some sickness in the body and we need to address it because it's best for all of us, including you, that we address it. And we're going to address it together, believer to believer, follower to follower to Jesus, because we all agree that Jesus is Lord, and we all agree that even though we're a messy church for messy people, that Jesus doesn't want to leave us in our mess. And so Jesus gives us a plan, but most people, I say that, I have no statistics. What I hear anecdotally from people, when they read this passage, they read it like a policeman. Like, this is how we're going to get people. And that is not Jesus' intention. It's a physician trying to heal. So verse 15, he says this: if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. Now remember, we're talking about you can win fights or win people. Here's the key. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. You hear the heart of Jesus? It's not like I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to you and I'm going to prove to you that I'm right. No, the heart is that we are walking with Jesus together. The point here in this story is somebody has done something wrong. They've sinned and it's created some conflict. And so I'm going to go to you, not because I want you to know I've been wronged and I want restitution and I want the amends. I'm going because I love you and I want you to walk with Jesus closer. Here's a couple of things, key takeaways I want you to just take out just this verse. Here's the first one. The smaller the number of people dealing with the conflict, the more likely the person's dignity stays intact. Right? So if someone is wronged and all of a sudden me and my 4 friends roll up on you and go, hey, we got to have a conversation. Like you may not even know you offended somebody. You may not even know you made a mistake. You may not even know that you sinned. You may not have known that you hurt me. And when 4 people show up knocking on your door, hey, we got to talk. How does that make you feel? Like all of a sudden the defenses come up, right? The purpose of one-to-one, there's some dignity involved because I love you. I'm not trying to come as the policeman and throw you in jail because I love you. I'm just coming to you, and I want your dignity intact. I'm not telling anybody else. Here's the second takeaway. He says, go, verse 15, he says, go privately. One of the things we miss because we're not Greek, which is what this is written in originally because we're English, is the tense of the verb. That word go is a present tense verb, meaning you're going to continually going. So understand the heart here. It might take me 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 conversations with you. See, sometimes we read it like a policeman, a checklist. Well, I went, check, and they didn't respond like I wanted them to do. So now let me move on to step 2. Step 1 as a process. Step 1 means, hey, I'm praying. Hey, step 1 means, hey, I go and I talk to you about it and it doesn't go so well. I go, hey, could we just pray about this and maybe go grab coffee next week and talk a little bit more about this? I know you kind of got caught off guard by this. You might feel overwhelmed and attacked. That's not my heart. Man, I love you and I just want to reconcile this relationship. Could we get back together and talk a little bit more this week? Just both of us pray about it. And you talk a little bit more. Maybe the resolution doesn't come out. Hey, can we just continue talking about this? That's the idea of that verb, that you go continually. It's not just a checklist because I'm a policeman and before I get them, I got to make sure I've got all my bases covered, right? No, because I love you. I want to engage in a relationship with you because I want you to be right before God and I want to be right before God and I want us to have no conflict. I want us to have a resolution that glorifies God because we are both followers of Jesus. Here's the third kind of takeaway out of this. Jesus says, go. And he says, privately. Privately means privately. Privately doesn't mean I went and talked to you after I talked to my 4 best friends all about you, right? That's not what privately means. Privately isn't like, hey, we're going to go to coffee, and I've got 6 people back praying for me right now. They might come into the mix to pray, but that's not privately. Generally, that's gossip. That's, hey, did you know this person did that? All your friends, they never even heard the other side of the conflict. They never heard the other side of the story. Jesus says, hey, you go one-on-one with the person's dignity in your mind, and you go with the relationship to be restored, that they would, in verse 15, listen and confess, and then you've won that person back. And conflict's over, handled, one-to-one, and now we're both walking with Jesus better. You get to choose. Do you want to win fights or do you want to win people? In every conflict. Then he says this, but if you're unsuccessful, take 1 or 2 others with you and go back again so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. There's a 3rd thing coming. We read it where the church gets involved. And so the second step, Jesus says, hey, take some other people. Part of that is that if it escalates to something bigger, it's not just he said, she said. There's some other witnesses involved. Now, when we're bringing other people in, it does not change the bottom line. Am I trying to win the fight or win people? I'm bringing another person with me or another 2 people because I love you and we cannot get over this and I want us to, and I want us to do it well. And when I bring 2 other people with me or another person, it also brings wisdom into the mix. It does give kind of, hey, we've got some objective viewpoints to have some deeper conversations if we have to have it, if the conflict continues to escalate. But it also brings wisdom into the picture. Now, all of a sudden, I've brought 2 people who love Jesus. They're believers as well. So now we're all 4 followers of Jesus. And I'm saying, hey, here's my conflict. If it didn't get answered in round 1, step 1, it's highly likely that the person that I have a conflict with has some conflict with me too, right? So when the other 2 people or the other person get involved in the mix, we have some wisdom, whereas I'm saying, hey, here's what the struggle is. They actually hear the person that I'm in conflict with go, well, here's what I'm saying. And here's how I see it. And here's what was done to me. And all of a sudden, I've got 2 other people in stage 2 that go, hey, maybe you haven't heard everything they're saying. Now we have some arbitrators. We have some wisdom in. One that may be witnesses for the future, but also to help us avoid getting to step 3, which is coming to the church. Maybe we can work it out in a smaller group. Now, I'm going to give you a peek into my life. One of the things that I will always do for you, as a messy church for messy people, I will tell you unequivocally, my life's a mess, right? I'm trying to follow Jesus just like you, but I never want people to think, oh, Brett's life is perfect. Oh, he's the pastor, he's on the stage, because you elevate me off the stage, and all of a sudden I hurt your feelings. It's a long fall from the top of the pedestal, right? I'm trying to walk with Jesus just like you guys are. I have conflicts just like you do. Amanda and I, my wife, had conflict this Christmas holiday. We're wrestling through kind of our new paradigm. Having planted a church, my weekends look different than they did before. Well, her family has a Christmas experience with her dad's side of the family. And they meet in Granbury, Texas. They do it on a Saturday, and it's kind of like, it's usually the Saturday right before Christmas. It's locked on the calendar. Everybody knows, people come all in, and we go every year. Well, it just so happens that Amanda's mom lives about 30 to 45 minutes from her dad's Christmas. Christmas is in Granbury, and mom lives in Springtown, Texas, 45-minute drive. So it just makes sense that when we drive up to do dad's Christmas with dad's side of the family, that we build the trip over to mom's side of the family because we're there, right? Done it that way for years. Well, dad's Christmas is December 21st, Saturday. And so we're talking through, and I'm like, hey, well, we've got dad's Christmas Saturday, December 21st at 5 o'clock in Granbury. And I've got to speak in Georgetown, Texas at 9 o'clock, December 22nd. And so I'm going to have to leave and come straight back. And then we started thinking about mom, because we do mom's Christmas. And I'm like, well, Amanda says, well, I want to do my mom's Christmas like the 22nd and 23rd, where I'm going to be up there. And I said, well, I can't. Like this is how we pay our bills even. Like, this is important. I said, so I was trying to solve the problem. And so I called my mother-in-law, hey, what can we do? And I said, what if we did it early? And she said, yeah. My mother's like, whatever we need to do, fine. So I told the man, I said, got it solved. I said, we'll just go up like the 18th, 19th, 20th, see your mom, and then 21st see your dad and come back. And I said, well, the problem is kids don't get out of school till the 20th. So kids get out of school the 20th, party the 21st, Christmas the 22nd, 23rd, but church, you see the problem we're having here? And I'm wrestling through okay, what do we do? And I said, well, let's just take the kids out of school. They're smart, they'll be fine. She said, well, yeah, but they're gonna have end of semester finals. They can't miss finals. And so then I'm thinking, I even talked to my mother-in-law, I said, I guess I could drive up on the 21st and drive back on the 22nd and then drive back up after church on the 22nd and stay for a few days. But since there's a Christmas Eve service on the 24th, then I have to drive back. Even my mother-in-law said, that sounds stupid. I'm like, I know. And so this created conflict. So Amanda's solution was she said, why don't we just cancel church on the 22nd? I said, well, first we have a series team. We got a whole series for Christmas. The 22nd's got a date. We've got it. And honestly, honey, I love you, but I feel uncomfortable. Hey, we ain't having church. I got Christmas. This just feels weird. And so the conflict goes for about a week. There's some tense feelings because I'm going to ruin Christmas. That's the feeling. So we end up sitting in our small group a couple Sundays ago, and this conversation comes up. And we've got 2 or 3 people. Actually, we supersized, steroided up Jesus' plan. We had 7 people in the conversation. So in the conversation, we're talking in the small group, and one of the members of our small group says this. They go, well, why don't you just have somebody preach for you on the 22nd? Huh. I've literally actually done that before. Never crossed my mind. We had a week's worth of conflict when we added a couple of other people into the conversation, into the conflict. Someone with wisdom threw out a no-brainer. I kind of sat there like dumbfounded. And one of the people in the small group asked, they said, because I was just sitting there quietly, they said, do you feel attacked right now? I said, no, I just feel stupid. I never even thought of that idea. They're so simple. Golly, a week of conflict. Other people came into the mix of the conflict and conflict solved, right? Some wisdom stepped in when I didn't have it and she didn't have it because all we could see is the conflict. Jesus says bring 2 or 3 people, 1 or 2 people, when it doesn't get resolved. But then, verse 17, if the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then, if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat the person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. Raise your hand if you feel a little uncomfortable right now, right? You know how many churches just never saw that. I don't even want to talk about it because it's just that level of conflict is so uncomfortable. But let me set the stage so you can understand, because remember, we're choosing to win fights or win people. When Jesus is saying this, there's literally not even a church. The church is coming after Jesus' death and resurrection. And when the church begins, the churches are small. They're more like house churches. Like we would be planting, we're 11 months old and we're significantly bigger than an early church. It would have been people sitting around in the houses worshiping together. So when there's a problem between people and they're living in the same community, the context of this teaching is different than what we're living in now. So if I've got a conflict with you, and I try to resolve it and we can't, and there's something wrong, and a couple other people get involved and we can't, there's something big going on, right? So then, since there's 10 to 12 of us that meet for church in my living room because we're a house church, and 2 of the 12 of us have conflict already, and another 3 have already been involved and we still can't figure out, guess who it's affecting? Everybody. Everybody. You can't sit in a house. It'd be like a small group. You can't be in a small group of 10 to 12 people. 2 people have major conflict. They try to deal with it. It's getting worse and worse. A couple other people join in. No resolution. The person's they've either doubled down. Your small group's going to have a problem. That's just the way it is. You can't have that. And so the small group is going to get engaged. And the small group in this section, a church, is going to say, hey, this is what you need to do. Listen, You need to do this, and you need to do this. We've come with collective wisdom. We're all got the Holy Spirit in us. We're seeking the Spirit of God, and the Spirit of God has spoken to us. We've prayed about it. We've fasted through it. We've talked about it. We still can't get to a resolution. Here's what we say, the 10 or 12 of us, as we've been praying in the Spirit. Hey, you need to do this, and you need to do that. And this person who doesn't want to do that at this point, the small group, or in this section, the church goes, hey, I guess this is where we part ways. We're not going to continue meeting as a small group with everyone hating each other. Like, that is not the way of Jesus. So we're going to have to figure out how to go a different direction. Now, in today's context, in church in 2024, not just ours, but other churches, you have a lot more superficial relationships, right? Like let's just be honest. Somebody on this side of the room has maybe come 20 weeks in a row, and someone on this side of the room has come 20 weeks in a row, and you still may not even know each other. Right, that's the church in 2024. So the relationships are not the relational relationships that are happening in this context. So here's what happens. In 2024, we handle it like the context teaches. We're not going to, like you get in a fight with somebody and, you know, hey, somebody owes me money, and they go, I don't owe you money, that's not true. And then other people come in and doesn't work out, and then we come to the church, and the church goes, yeah, we've heard all things, we've seen the finances, like you owe money, and then you go, I'm not going to pay, and then we go, could you come up here on the stage for a second? This person's out. Like that's not how it functions, how it works, right? That's what people are afraid of, though, right? But listen, as a church, believer to believer, follower to follower, we do have the responsibility for each other. That if you have sin in your life, or you're not doing things the way Jesus would have you do, that we do have the responsibility to come along to each other and go, hey, I got to coach you up, and you got to coach me up, and we got to help each other walk this direction. So what happens in 2024, it's still the same principle. If somebody has church discipline practiced on them, we are going to communicate to the people who were affected by that sin, right? We're going to communicate to the people that person who has unrepentantly decided, I am not going to follow Jesus. We're going to communicate to the people that might be under them that followed them. And we're going to communicate to people who might be able to help that person. That's who. We're not putting in the church email, hey, this person's a sinner, scarlet letter, no one talk to them. We're going to talk to the people that were affected and say, hey, here's what happened, and here's the decision. They've decided they don't want to be a part here anymore. We're going to talk to the people that might have been influenced to them. Maybe you were leading a team or something like that. We're going to let those people know. So they're not like, well, where did Bob go? We haven't seen Bob. Like, he just disappeared. We're going to let them know. And we're going to let the people know in the church who could come alongside you and help you walk with Jesus. That's it. That's who would have known in the first century who Jesus is talking about. Those are the same people. And that's who we would bring into the conversation now. But again, listen, it's not policeman, it's physician. It's not out to get you. It's not I'm working a checklist. Somebody's mad at me. I got to check one. I talked to him, and I got a friend and talked to him, and now the church has been involved. Now get them out of here. It's all about we're doing life together. We love each other, and we want to walk with Jesus better. So the person who gets through all of these stages and still is unrepentant with every person around them who is their friends and their church members and probably their family saying, hey, you've got to address this. And that person still continues to go, I'm not changing. Then Jesus says, hey, you treat them like a tax collector, as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. Now, that feels harsh too. What it means is you're no longer in leadership positions. It means that you're no longer going to be allowed to continue coming to some places or some things if you stir up dissension. I had a real life story, real talk, years ago where an 18-year-old girl had an affair with a 30-year-old married man. And in the whole walking through the process, there was lies and there was deceit and there was all kinds of things that we tried to reconcile. And when it finally came out, the truth, and there were no lies, we practiced church discipline. Not here, at another church I was at. We did not pull both people up and go, these two people had an affair. The young lady was leaving, moving someplace else, and we just said, hey, you're not allowed to go on some of these things that she was going to attend. I said, you're no longer allowed to mentor junior high girls. And here's what she said to me. You can't tell me that I can't mentor those junior high girls. Which actually was kind of true. Right? I'm not following around. I said, you're right. I said, but here's what I will do. If you choose to continue seeking relationships of mentoring these 6th grade girls, after unrepentantly having an affair and ruining a marriage, and you don't care, if you continue to reach out to these 6th grade girls, I will call those girls' parents and tell them the things that I know, so that those parents can make the wise decisions about who is mentoring their kids. That's church discipline, right? Wasn't up on the stage of, don't anybody talk to her. We handled it with the people who she would have influenced and the people who were affected by it, and tried to lovingly correct her and help her walk in the way that Jesus wanted her to walk. She chose not to, and here's the deal. At that point, we didn't have to say, can't come back. She didn't want to be back because she knew where she stood with the Lord and with his church. That's hard, right? It's hard. But it's the way that we handle things in conflict. It's the best way to do it. So, next steps. What do we do? Now, let me tell you this too. City church membership. We do membership a little bit different. Some churches, you just if you're a Christian, you've been baptized, you're like, that's me, and they go, yeah, you're on, and then you're a member until you can move to another. You can be dead for 7 or 8 years, and you're still a member. No one knows. People are like, hey, so and so's a member. They're like, they moved to North Carolina, and we go, well, we can't. They're still a member. Can't do anything about it. We have annual membership here. So at December 31st, we're coming up. We're about to have no members on December 31st until January 1st. We have a 1-minute window with no church members. Every January, and so you'll start seeing this email, we say, hey, here's what it means to be a member at City Church. And we list out the expectations. Trying to be, working towards being in a small group, giving towards the tithe. If you go, I can't give 10%. Some people can't because they just started the financial stewardship, and they realize, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, but I need to start making my money align with God's plan. We'd say you start giving towards the tithe. You start working your plan. Remember that you're going to be involved, that you're going to love the members, you're going to pray for the church. There's several things that people just check off and sign off on doing. That you have your everyday rhythms written out that we talk about. Your personal discipleship plan. You check all those things out. Well, when you log into that membership, you're also going to see our church discipline statement. It's this. It's Matthew chapter 18. And the idea, again, isn't hey, we're kicking you out if you don't do what we say. The idea is if you said, hey, I am in at following Jesus at this level, that I'm doing this and this and this and this and this in my attempt to walk with Jesus, and I'm in the vision and mission of City Church, and I understand we're a messy church for messy people, and I'm in, I want to hand the keys to the next generation. I want to be a part of a church that unchurched people want to come to. I'm all in, and I'm chasing after Jesus. You should have no problem at that point going, and if I stray, I want someone to come to me and walk me back towards Jesus. I want other people to come in because I don't want to stray. That's the purpose of church discipline. It's not policemen to get people out. It's a physician to go, hey, I'm in. I'm a part of this church. Hey, this is out of line. Come back with us and let's get in alignment and unity. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Now, if you walk around living in fear, well, what if I get caught? Well, there's your sign, right? Take care of that issue. Let the church come alongside. Here's next step number 1. You've got to get you some spiritual friends. Spiritual friends, wise friends, 2 a.m. friends. That's why a small group is so important. It's hard to make small groups it is. Take the initiative. Find some people, 3 or 4 other people, 3 or 4 other couples if you're married, or just, it doesn't have to be couples. You can have singles and couples, whatever. Hey, can we just get together every couple of weeks and just open up the Word, talk about the sermon, let's do this Bible study together, let's pray together, because I need you and you need me, but you need spiritual friends. Because this process, this Matthew 18 process, the purpose of winning people and not fights, and the people are more important than the process. You realize the process could work itself out at a bar, right? Somebody cheats in pool, and I go tell you, hey, you cheated me in pool, and I'm not paying you money, and we have one-on-one, I went to you privately, and you go, I'm not paying, so I get my friends to come over, 1 or 2 friends, they go, hey, you owe him money, and he goes, no, I don't, and so the whole bar gets involved, and we have a bar fight till the bouncers throw us out and tell us not to come back. That's the process. The process isn't important. It's the people, the wise people, and it's the decision that I'm in this because I want to win people and not win fights. So that means you've got to have spiritual people that come around you. And when you have conversations, they're speaking truth to your life. There was a couple that, man, in some ways I would love this to happen, but I know it doesn't really work out this way. But they got an alert that they had a deposit in their bank account. A teller at the bank had accidentally deposited $120,000 into the wrong account. And this guy looks at his banking app, and all of a sudden he's like, "We're rich." He goes out, buys an SUV, buys 2 ATVs, pays off a ton of bills, give one of his friends $15,000, and the bank goes, "Oh, hey, we made a mistake. We need the $120,000 back." And he went, "So sorry, so sad, but it's gone." That's like what I would have thought. But then the bank said, "Well, you're actually going to be charged with felony theft if you don't pay it back because it wasn't your money. You should have realized this $120,000 isn't mine." So now he's in the court system trying to get it all figured out. And the news is picking up the story, and they interview him as he's walking out of the court, and they're like, they're trying to catch him. They're like, "Hey, like what happened in there? Like, what happened to $120,000? This was his quote. He said, "I took bad advice from the wrong people." He told somebody, "I got $120,000, and they're like, "Go get a new car." Terrible friends, right? Somebody should have said, "Hey, how did you get that? Maybe you should call the bank, and let's try to figure those things." Say, "Hey, lend me 15 grand. Let me have that," right? The wrong friends. That's what he said. The wrong friends, the wrong advice. You need spiritual friends to help you manage conflict. And here's the second one, and we're going to wrap up. You've got to decide now. You got to decide now how you're going to handle conflict when you're on the other side. For 3 weeks, we've talked about how do you handle conflict when somebody's offended you. But there's coming a day where you've offended someone else. There's coming a day where your sinful choice affects a relationship, and someone's going to come to you, hopefully, privately, and go, "Hey, you've hurt me. Hey, you've done this wrong." You need to decide right now, today, how you're going to handle that situation. Because I'll tell you right now, if you decide right now to handle it the way Jesus would, I want to win people and not win fights, it's going to be difficult. Because no one likes to be called out. If you don't decide right now that you're going to handle it the way Jesus would, it's going to be next to impossible to win people. So you've got to decide now, will you be submissive to people? Will you be submissive to a small group? Will you be submissive to a church? Will you be submissive to people that go, "Hey, you really need to look at this in your life because we think Jesus is calling you to a better direction"? That's what we want. That's the heart of Matthew 18. Close with this, and the guys are going to come up and lead us in one more song. I have a friend, and I'm not saying names or anything like this because some people who know me would know this person, a close friend. Close enough that like a son. And over the years, I've known him for, 20 years probably. Over the years, we've spent a lot of life together. And over the years, his theology, his belief about God began to shift and change. And it began to change 180 degrees from what I would tell you and what you would say is biblical truth. And he started making life choices and doing some things that were not walking with Jesus. It's crazy as I tell this story and I say I don't say the person, I realize there's about 3 or 4 people in my life I could be describing right now. But this one in particular would say things and I would engage. He'd speak something that was theologically incorrect. He'd speak something that didn't make sense. And I felt compelled to fix it, right? No, that's not right. And we would debate because I was older, because I'd been to more school and things like that. I, by and large, won all the debates. And winning those debates time and time again was never said to me, but I began to sense it over time, caused the relationship to stray. And person would post things on social media, and I would jump in on social media, and again, same thing, like personal conversations, that was said, nope, that's not true, and I would attack it, and it would, never a yelling, screaming fight. A couple times where it got to the point where he didn't want to talk to me for a few days. And then this realization of what we're talking about for the last 3 weeks, that culminate in this idea, do you want to win fights or do you want to win people? the Lord just started convicting me. And so I stopped engaging on social media. I didn't post anything in response. And when things were said that were theologically incorrect, whatever, I went back to that Proverbs and went, look, I'm just going to overlook it. It's not the end of the world. Because I would rather have the relationship than prove that I'm right. Because here's what I know. Here's what I know. I've lived life long enough to know that I am 0 for 7,300 people of arguing, conflict, trying to win, and in the midst of the conflict, like I haven't won one out of 7,000 where somebody went, you know what? You're right. You're right. I've been wrong this whole time. I'm changing. Maybe that's happened for you. Man, God bless. Write a book about that. No, I'm almost 50. It's never happened in my life. I've seen relationships disappear. I'm just choosing what I think Jesus would do to love people. Let me tell you this too. You come back, I want to circle back real quick. Jesus said, person to person doesn't work, group of people doesn't work, church doesn't work. He says remove them and treat them like tax collectors. We read that and we go, okay, we're going to be mean to those people. But here's what I want you to know. We were reading in Matthew chapter 18 an eyewitness account of someone who spent years, 3 years plus of his life with Jesus, was a disciple. And you know what his job was? Tax collector. You know why Jesus got in trouble? Because he hung out with the tax collectors. So when we're treating someone like the tax collector, doesn't mean that we hate them and they're now the enemy. It just means, hey, you're probably not going to be, unless you're repentant like Matthew was, unless you're repentant, you're not going to be in the inner circle. You're not going to experience the blessing of church. You're not going to experience the blessing of a small group. You're not going to have these people because you've chosen that you don't want it, right? It's just honoring that choice. You chose conflict over people. We're still going to love you. And I didn't make the decision to love people in my life that I just disagreed with, because people were more important than being right. And at the end of the day, when I go see Jesus after a few short trips around this sun, God only knows how many I'll get. Man, I don't want to go in my last days going, man, I sure did win a lot of those debates. I sure did win a lot of those arguments while I'm laying here in this hospital bed with no one around me. Because people matter more. And we're not going to sacrifice biblical truth, but we're going to love people no matter what. And we handle conflict, making the decision. You got the steps, but overarching all those steps is, do you want to win, or do you want to win fights, or do you want to win people? Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this series. God, it's been transforming for me to wrestle through these passages and see your grace come through passages that seem so just. But to read these and to see your heart was for Matthew the tax collector, that your heart was for reconciliation, that your heart was for your people to be in right relationship. And Lord, sometimes when people just choose not to, we have to step away. But then we'll keep loving and wanting them restored and entering conflict, wanting to help people be like you and to win relationships rather than win fights. God, help us to be the best kind of fighters when conflict comes, the way that you were. If you came in this morning, you don't have a relationship with Jesus, man, I would love for you to consider. Maybe you've been running for Jesus from a long time. And I'll tell you, Jesus is the solution to conflicts. You need Team Jesus behind you in your corner. And if you want Jesus to come be boss of your life, you want to give your life to him, it is heaven, but it's also abundant life here. All the work's been done. You don't have to do anything for that. Jesus died on the cross for your sin and has an open invitation for you to join his family. And if you want that, you want to follow him. You want him to be in control of your life. Here's what I want you to do. I just want you to pray this with me. I just want you to tell Jesus that you're a sinner, that you're messed up, that you're a messy, broken person. And that shouldn't be hard for you because we all are. And will you just confess, agree that with Jesus that he is God, that he died on the cross, that he was raised from the dead? You say, Jesus, I believe that. And just in your own way, in your own prayer, just ask him to come be boss of your life. If you prayed that prayer, if you gave your heart to Jesus this morning, here's what I want you to do. Your next step, you've got a half sheet of paper you got when you walked in. It's got a phone on it. It's got a phone number at the top. Would you just text Jesus to that number? If you got questions about Jesus, text Jesus to that number. We'll get together and talk about your questions. Take your next step. Just told you membership starts in January. Maybe you want to align your life with where we're going. Go, yes, I want to follow Jesus. I want to be all in. Maybe you need to go on to that email or that link tree that's on that half sheet of paper and join City Church. If you don't, we'd love you. Love for you to just be an attender and come. But maybe you need to take that next step. Maybe God's been wrestling with you about ministry. Maybe God's been calling you to surrender your life to him, either in a volunteer role or maybe even vocationally. Whatever you need to do to respond to the Lord, maybe you just need to come back to him. This moment is that time. We're going to sing, but you do business with God in whatever way, those next steps of conflict, whatever you need to do, let's do now. We're going to stand, we're going to sing.